Good morning and welcome to Travels with Monkey Boy. We are continuing on day 2 of our trip to Nepal, the River of the Dead. We arranged for a 5:30 a.m. wake-up call. There were no phones in the room for a wake-up call and no clock in the room to set an alarm. I think one needs to get a full night's sleep after a night with no sleep. But since I was in charge of planning this trip, and since I come from the school of thought that a vacation should be so miserable that you can't wait to get back to work, we had to get up right away to start our vacation. Actually, this wasn't all my fault. I really figured that when you come to Nepal, you don't want to spend too much time in the big city. Nepal is a nature trip. So we only had one day between adventure stuff and our flight to Jeddah to explore Kathmandu. And the way I figured it, if you come to Nepal and you don't see Mount Everest, you must be some kind of bonehead. So we took the 1 hour round trip flight to go see the mother of all mountains. I sometimes think that the flying over mountains is the best way of seeing them. I've often flown over the Rockies, the Alps, and the Andes, and it's always impressive to see the snow-capped peaks and jutting rocky cliffs. What's more, in a flight, you get to see in a short period of time dozens of peaks and from an angle that you can't see from the ground, plus orange juice and peanuts. If seeing the Rockies from a plane was spectacular, just think of what Mount Everest would look like. I mean, these were the Himalayas. I've heard about these mountains since I was 5 years old. Everest has always had the ring of something unique and exotic. So this flight, this viewing of mountains from a plane was going to be spectacular. And you know what? They're just another bunch of mountains from an airplane. Okay, maybe they were 30,000-foot peaks versus the Rockies and the Alps fight 15,000-foot peaks. But as a 6-foot creature, they're just big damn mountains. Sort of like an ant walking across a table and seeing a party of a group of kids, and then 6 months later walking across the same table and seeing a party of the Chicago Bulls. If the ant knew in advance the bulls were twice as tall, he might be impressed at their absolute majesty. But from an ant's point of view, kids are pretty damn huge too. In fact, Everest was one of the more disappointing things I've seen. I mean, you hear 30,000-foot peaks and it sounds like, wow. But you never hear that next to Everest is a mountain called Lhotse that's 28,000 feet. That's what, about 3 to 4% difference? But there wasn't just Lhotse, there was about a dozen peaks that were in the 25,000-foot range. But what's even more deflating about the Himalayas is that while they are 25 to 30,000 feet high, they rise out of the Tibetan plain, which is 17,000 feet high. So basically, the mountains are maximum 12,000 feet above their surrounding base. The Rockies and the Alps both come off a fairly flat plain of about 3,000 feet. So relatively, they're as high as the Himalayas. And Mount Kilimanjaro, which we saw last year, is nearly 20,000 feet and it rises out of a plain also of 3,000 feet. So if you want a starkly impressive mountain, go see Kilimanjaro. After my initial statement that seeing mountains is best from an airplane, I now retract. Seeing most mountains is best from an airplane. But to understand the Himalayas, you need to be on the ground. Because frankly, a plateau of 17,000 feet is unbelievable. I mean, stupid old Denver brags about being the mile-high city, 5,000 feet. This is more than 3 times that much. Standing at the foot of the Himalayas, you would be 2 miles higher than Denver. And in fact, I think the best appreciation for Everest is the fact that when you're in an airplane, the captain will come over the speakers and say, "We are about to reach our cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. If you look up ahead and to the right, you can see Mont Blanc, the highest peak in the Alps. And when you look over to the right and about 3 miles down, but still relatively pretty high, is Mont Blanc." The same message over the Himalayas would be something like, "We are about to reach our cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, and the slight crunching sound you're hearing is the bottom of our plane scraping some snow off of Everest." So was it worth it? You know, frankly, it wasn't as inspiring as that balloon ride over the Serengeti referenced last videos that I said was only okay. Still, How can you come to Everest and not go to see Mount Everest, Nepal, and not go to Mount Everest? It's awesome knowing it exists. And I guess it's awesome being able to see it. Still, next time I see it, I want to do something like hike up to the base. We were back in our hotel by about 9:30 a.m., and we had no events scheduled until 1:30 that afternoon. But we did have to get our passport photos taken. No, there's no great adventure around our passport photos getting taken, but I mention it because in the photo store, they had a picture of a Hindu god. Okay, they had a picture of Christ. They have pictures of Christ all over the place in the States. But what is interesting about this picture is that it was a picture of a living God. Actually, I guess technically she's a goddess. Here's the deal. They say she's about 11 years old. She's born as a god and remains a god until she bleeds any kind of blood. She falls and skins her knee, she's out, mortal again. Deep paper cut, she becomes human. Cuts her finger making lunch, out of the palace. Of course, there's a built-in clock on this god. And as soon as she becomes a woman, she stops being a god. There's sure there sure seems like there's a joke in there someplace. Then they find a new baby girl born and they make her the new god. Curious thing though, this baby comes from only Buddhist families. Did you know that Buddha was born as a Hindu? In fact, the similarities between Buddhism and Hinduism and Christianity, Judaism is interesting. Christ was born a Jew and created a new religion that took his name. His new religion had many of the same tenets of the older Jewish faith, but made it kinder and gentler. He was a god and preached hope. Buddha, ditto, except by all accounts, he was fatter. Okay, other than that, the religions are nothing alike. But I thought that little bit was interesting. I mean, the Hindus claim to have 30 million gods. There's a god of trees, a god of water, a god of cows, a god of rocks, everything. And they are always fighting and killing and having sex. Geez, they are always having sex. Most of the temples we couldn't let the kids look at too closely because covering every square foot of many of the temples is intricate wood carvings where pictures of men and women, women and women, men and multiple women, multiple men and multiple women, all in various conjugal positions. It would be akin to going to Mass on Sunday instead of having the 10 stages of the cross depicting Christ's various stages of suffering. You'd have pictures from Playboy magazine. No wonder the Indians have 1 billion people. At 1:30, we were picked up to do our city tour. We had a very knowledgeable guide who gave me much of the living God information above. The first place we visited was one of the most famous Buddhist temples. It covered about a city block. The temple was surrounded by a 6-foot wall that every 5 feet had a series of little prayer wheels that you accessed through little cutout windows. The point appeared to be you walked around the city block wall clockwise, and every prayer wheel you came upon, you spun it also clockwise. I'm not sure what the effect of this spinning was, but the kids would make good Buddhists. The tower part of the temple, maybe 4 stories high, had one giant painted eye facing each of the 4 directions. You could climb about halfway up the temple tower and have a reasonably nice view of the dirty, rundown city around you. At this halfway up landing, there was a series of little stone boxes where you could put a donation, seeds, an orange, a dead chicken, anything, and take back in return some red kind of chalky dye that is used to put a red dot on your head. I red dotted Frankie and she seemed quite pleased. The Hindus also do the red dot thing, but as I said, the Hindus and the Buddhists are pretty much the same. The biggest difference is that as a Hindu, you live your life stuck in one stage, and at the end of your life, you're reincarnated, hopefully as something better. Eventually, after millions of years, you can move up the ladder and become a god. The Buddhists feel that you can move up the ladder in one lifetime. I like the optimism of that. Anyway, Buddha was born in Nepal, down south. And this shrine was famous because for about 1,000 years, it was the biggest. A couple of years ago, the Thais built a bigger one. But Buddha had his revenge by destroying their currency. Anyway, the whole temple looked kind of cheap and dirty to me. But then again, if you check the average bank account of your average Buddhist, I think you find this is one of the poorer regions of the world. After the Buddhist temple, we went to see a Hindu shrine. Okay, we didn't actually see it since the Hindus won't let you go into their temple grounds unless you know the secret handshake or whatever it is that proves you're a Hindu. This shrine is to Vishnu and is famous for all Hindus. Apparently, inside the grounds and before the temple itself is a giant penis. Sorry to the young and easily offended listeners, but okay, that's what it is. They tell us that this is one of the primary honeymoon spots for Indians. Visiting this Vishnu temple is supposed to be good for your baby production. Though, frankly, you get babies the same way in Hawaii, and it's got better beaches. We didn't stay here long, though, and in fact, I was a bit indignant that we couldn't fit in a visit to see the living God, but we had time to stop and look at the outside of a temple that we weren't invited to see. Still, the story was nice and experiencing the culture was nice, and the kids enjoyed seeing the dozens of dirty monkeys rummaging in the garbage and further enhancing the general state of filthy disgustedness of this place. But we hadn't seen anything yet. See, after the penis temple, it was a short walk over to the River of the Dead. Apparently, this river has a special place in the heart of Hindu worshippers, though not so sacred that it kept them from throwing garbage into it. Because it is so sacred, all Hindus want to have their ashes sprinkled into it. Again, not to be too repetitive in my talking, but in Christianity, we go to a crematorium, get a nice little urn of our deceased's ashes, and then go sprinkle them where we like. Not the Hindus. Here they burn the bodies right at the riverside. And when I say burn the bodies, I'm not talking about a man in a pine box. They have the damn bodies sitting right there on a pile of kindling, burning away for all the world to see. We were lucky because when we happened by, there was a fresh cremation going on. He was a poor man being burned on the cheap side of the bridge with a club foot. We didn't get to see the start, but we saw him soon after the start. His hair was gone, but the skin on his head was still there, charred, but there. After about 20 minutes, a man with a big club came by and broke the man's legs and folded them into the heart of the fire. When the body was completely burned, they shoveled his ashes into the river. Jilreen and Joe were completely grossed out. The kids were fascinated, and I was furiously writing myself notes. Don't drink the water. Don't drink the water. Don't drink the water. The river was lined with burning shrines. There was a bridge across to a temple we couldn't go in, and on our side of the river, there were troops of Hindu monks and monkeys. Not Hindu monkeys, just monkeys. The old, long-bearded monks in their red and gold robes took a shine to Frankie, but fortunately for us, it started to rain, so we had a built-in excuse to take her and run quickly away. The final stop in our day's journey was Bhaktapur. This was the ancient city of the Malla kings. If you've seen the movie Little Buddha, you know Bhaktapur because that was where it was filmed. Bhaktapur was about a 20-minute drive from the River of the Dead. It drizzled lightly on the drive over, but just outside of the gates of the old city, the sky opened up and it poured down rain. The guide told us, no problem, because since this was the dry season, hard rains like this lasted only about 10 minutes. We found a wood carving shop to look into and spent half an hour shopping while the rain poured down harder. Finally, the guide said he knew of a very special Nepalese craft store just 5-minute drive away. So we went there to kill another 45 minutes. At this point, it was getting too dark and the rain had slowed to a drizzle. So I insisted that we take the 10-minute walk to the center of the old town. About 5 minutes towards the center of the town, the skies opened up on us again and we had to race for cover. The city gave the impression of being perhaps one of the coolest places of Asian architecture, though we mostly saw it in the dark with rain dripping off of it. It also looked to be a cool set for a movie, and I have every intention of renting Little Buddha so that I can brag more about what I saw in Bhaktapur. It is about 5 o'clock now, and it didn't seem like it was worth waiting any longer, so we raced off to the car and headed home. It had been less than 24 hours in Kathmandu, and already we began to appreciate Jeddah. We have some friends at the consulate that were stationed in Kathmandu for 2 years. Nepal is real third world. Bad roads, unruly traffic, obscene pollution, from too many trucks and cars without catalytic converters, dangerous water, poor retail. Jeddah is a challenge from its oppressive rules prohibiting fun, but it sure is nice to be able to take a clean, straight road to a McDonald's. Anyway, the reason I mention it is that our friends told us to stop at this restaurant, Fire and Ice, near our hotel. It was a real pizza place. And after a day of seeing 6 Mile High mountains and living gods and cremations, a little bit of America was nice. Needless to say, we gorged ourselves. The Joes and I had the calzone, everybody else had flat pizza. After we reached the point of barely being able to touch another piece, we ordered ice cream. We waddled back to the hotel and were in bed by about 9 so we could wake up at 6 a.m. for our big day. Okay, that's the story for today. Let me share with you, first of all, the map. Okay, remember we're coming from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. This is the map. We got India here. Bangladesh is over here at the edge of the river. And here is Kathmandu. It's nestled in a plain. Up here, you see the Himalaya mountains. Okay. And now I'll show you some pictures. Here's little Frankie, isn't she adorable? With her Jetta t-shirt on, standing in front of one of the temples. There's the thing where you walk, there's Bethany in front of her with the very short hair. You walk around and there's the little prayer things that you're supposed to twist. So any little kids with OCD, which basically all kids, a lot of fun. There we were getting in the flight, Buddha Air, to go see Mount Everest. There is the temple with the eyes. There's the sets of eyes pointing in every direction. There's Alex wishing that there was something more fun to do than look at dirty old temples. There we are walking around the prayer things. Okay, that's all we got for today. More tomorrow. Thanks for coming.